The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View. The show is sponsored by the Nashua City Republican Committee, and if you like to attend our meetings, they're the second Thursday of every month at 6:30 at the Crown Plaza. And if you want to find out more about our organization, you can go to nashuagop.org to see our website and learn about the events that we have.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello, and help me welcome the Speaker of the House, Shawn, Jasper, and the Majority Leader, Dick.
Good to see you,
How
Carl.
you doing, Dick?
Yes.
Hey, by the way, I want to let you know that I thought your article in the Union Leader was very good.
Thank you.
About
Thank you.
The things that worked out in the budget and everything else. You've been pretty busy over the last couple months.
We have been very busy since December, really. But
Yeah, but I think it was a little heavy there right around the end of April. But let's look ahead. Let's look ahead and see now. We got this. We had a May 4th meeting. We're moving in through the Senate bills and everything. What's coming ahead as we have to resolve both the budget and some of these other financial things that are playing in the whole legislature?
Sure.
Well, certainly there's a lot of big issues that are over in the Senate. In the House, I think that Dick would probably agree with me that we have the election reform bill, Senate Bill 3, that is still in the House possession that we have to act on, and that's going to be very important. And of course, then we'll get into the committees of conference, and particularly the budget.
Well, how are you interacting? How is the House interacting with the Senate on some of these bills now?
Well, I'll let Dick speak to that right now.
First, I think we discussed this before. We are blessed that we have a very, very great working relationship between the leadership of the House and the Senate. We interact with the Senate President, Senate Majority Leader on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day. So we're keeping track of the bills that are both in the House and in the Senate. And as the Speaker said, we have Senate bills that we're now dealing with. And as you know, when we finished yesterday, that was the last day to act on bills that now have to go to a second committee, most of them or many of them to finance, some to other policy committees. And so they'll navigate through all those. The Senate now, you were talking about being busy back in April. The Senate has all of our bills, and that's what they're dealing with right now. So they have the task in front of them that we sent them as a gift. Relative to the budget, they're working through the budget phase right now, and they're building upon the best parts of the House budget and the governor's budget, and then they will come out with a budget at the end of the month.
Any projections that you see? Or I know I've been in contact with the Senate Finance Chairman. I'm trying to get him on this show, but
Gary.
he's busy than a paper hanger.
As Republicans, we all want to see the budget as low as we can make it on a practical basis. The problem is people have some false perceptions about things. The consumer price index, the rate of inflation, has nothing to do with the state budget. And we have a lot of things that are driving the state budget. We're opening a new prison. We're actually taking money from the general fund, putting it into the highway fund. There are just so many moving parts. We've had people who have been dealing with our elderly and our disabled for almost a decade without any type of raise. You can go to McDonald's and make more money than what we're paying some of these people.
I agree.
And, that's the reality of the tough times we're in. This time, we're able to ramp up the budget a little bit, by no means, going hog wild, but recognizing the factors that have been in play. We're able to give some of those people some some raises, which are above the rate of inflation because they've been 10 years without any, in some cases,
yeah.
without anything. You can't say, oh, well, we'll just ignore the last 10 years. We're losing qualified people. We want good people working with our elderly and our disabled, and we're going to have to pay them more than what they can go and
Oh, definitely.
flip burgers at
yeah.
McDonald's or, you know, Wendy's. So,
No, that's I'm unfortunately had to use some of those people, and I know they're very good, they're very qualified, but they are not getting paid very much. Sometimes a babysitter gets more than.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
and so you have to look at those things, and that's our challenge, is to get people to understand we're not talking about the rate of inflation. And some people going, well, but I only got, 2.5%. You can't spend more than that. We're not taking any additional money from anybody in the state of New Hampshire because it's just the natural progression of revenues without increases. And as a matter of fact, we have a small business tax cut built into the budget. This budget should be seen by all Republicans as the budget we've been trying to get for years. And yet the goalpost seems to move.
Well, without getting back into what we talked about a month ago, I think the finance committee had really done a good job, and we just had a very good year. The income was good, and it still looks like it's good. I understand the April numbers came in pretty
The
nice.
April numbers came in good. April alone was 40 million above projections. Right. However, as taken from July 1st through the end of April, we're only 17 million ahead of projections, and that's on over $2 billion in general funds. So that's
right.
Ways and Means did an excellent job.
They did.
So I mean, it's good because it's to the plus, but
I think that the only complaint that I really heard, and I guess I reflected on, was that people wanted to give some more money back to the voters, the ones that. And that was hard to do. I mean, you've done it by giving some to the towns, and they should be taking it off.
Well, that's $25 million a year we're trying to send back to the cities and towns, and yet there were people complaining about that. One of the things that people don't seem to focus on when it comes to state revenues, if you give money back, it doesn't go back to the taxpayers, the property taxpayers in the city or town, because we're not really taking the money there. We've got this, statewide property tax. It's sort of a gimmick.
Yeah.
There's no other way to put it. That's, that's how things have worked out. That's how we meet part of our obligation to education. But, the average person, they'll pay gas tax. That goes directly into the highway fund. Yes, if you go out to eat, you'll pay rooms and meals. Those are really the only two taxes that the average person pays to the state of New Hampshire. So, how do you give money back? The best way is to give the aids to cities and towns, because most of the taxes that people pay in the state of New Hampshire are through their property taxes.
I hope the people understand that and actually go to their, the appropriate people in their cities and towns and demand a little bit of cutback.
Sure.
I don't know how Nashua's going to do, because I know right now they're talking about whether they have to break the cap or not.
Right. Well, and to that point, as the speaker was saying, had the funding that was allocated in there, the 25 and 25, gone, that would have been worth $900,000 to Nashua.
Right.
So if just take Nashua for a second with this conversation. So the timing of this would have been the first $25 million comes out, and it actually would have come out this year after the tax rate was set by DRA. So therefore, it would have truly been a tax relief for of $450,000 in total for the residents of Nashua. And so I look at Merrimack, and Merrimack would have been $450,000. And so, we can say the first 200 goes to tax relief. Well, Merrimack just approved a bond for a highway garage, which we've been working on for 20 years trying to get a new one. And so I went to the town council and said, for the second year when this allocation comes out, what would you use it for? And they said, we would, in a heartbeat, all of them, in units, we'd use it to pay down the bond.
bonds.
So there again, now you truly have
Good.
tax relief because the bond payment is not on the backs of the taxpayers. So, you know, I think there was a little bit of a lack of understanding there.
I agree with you.
And, but having said that, the budget reflected no new taxes and fees. And it also, as the speaker said, it had embedded in it a further tax cut for business. And so it was the best of all worlds because there was no new taxes and fees, and it had an embedded second year of the tax.
Well, I hope that that people realize that, and also the money that went for improvements and
Right.
And one of the things that I try to focus on that really irks me that some reps don't seem to appreciate or understand or just choose to ignore is, in 2007, and yes, 2007 was a Democratic budget and it was rather large, but regardless, that was the level of spending that was set 10 years ago. Our general fund spending, the money that comes strictly from those fees and taxes we raise within the state of New Hampshire from, well, and thankfully a lot come from tourists and people passing through, is still $80 million less than that general fund spending 10 years ago.
I don't think people really
I
saw
think
that
that's
as
pretty
much as-
remarkable.
Yeah.
Because you can't, I'm sure you can't find a city or town or school district that can say we're spending less,
Yeah.
property tax money than we were 10 years ago. There isn't any place, I'm sure, that has a lower property tax rate than they did 10 years ago.
And in the budget, there's always things that you'll like, and there's always things that you won't like. And I find that the best budget is the one that you did yourself for yourself, So I think everybody has to, and I'm confident. I think we'll all come together, and I think there will be a budget that comes about.
I really
in
got an
June.
impression that there wasn't anything that we really didn't like in the budget. It's just that overall, they would have liked to see more.
Yeah,
maybe
the
in
perception
rainy
was
fund or
the
something
increase
like that.
was
That's
slightly.
all.
And the problem is, Carl, that all the proposals that came forward were, one, they all included taking monies away from the cities and town,
Yeah.
which seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
And two, then making an across-the-board cut, saying, we have no idea where to make cuts, make the governor do it. Well, the governor presented us with a budget. We cut
A lot out of that.
almost $100 million out of his budget. And so he obviously wasn't going to be able to find that. That's an irresponsible way to budget in my mind, to say, let somebody else deal with it. I just think it's too high. I don't know where. I don't know how to cut it. But
Well, I think
that's-
the timing and the process is something to be desired, I guess, might be.
well,
It's
know,
always the same, though.
Yeah.
but it is because, the way we do our budget with it, in the way that we're structured, we have 6 months. The governor has six.
yeah.
He gets sworn in. He has 6 weeks to do his budget. We have 6 weeks to look at his budget. Then the Senate has 6 weeks to look at our budget. And then we have a few weeks to come together. And then we have a couple weeks to sell it to the House. And then it's
You don't
July
even
1st
have a
and
couple-
constitutionally.
You don't even have a couple of weeks this last time to sell it to the House. You
Well,
had 3 days.
Well, but that's the way, because we got a week extra from the Senate as it was. But the problem is, Carl, we had 0 representatives go into finance and present any. There's a 6-week process, and in that 6 weeks, there was not one single suggestion brought forward to
Cut.
the finance.
Oh, so-
The Senate held a hearing this week.
Yes.
And
Monday
there
night.
were 2 representatives that showed up? One was a Republican and one was a Democrat. And they didn't have any proposals.
Right.
So, here we are in this process for months, and people are still just
Somebody
saying,
should have come into that.
if you think you have a better idea than what the people who have been delving into this have, bring it forward, but just don't sit back and complain that somebody didn't do the job that you didn't know how to do.
But
And we face the same thing in local budgeting
I
politics
imagine,
as
yeah.
well too. And I know again, speaking for Merrimack, the deliberative session, we have 28,000 residents. Okay, so we have 21,000 voters on any given deliberative session, and we do a March-April voting time period. And understand this, that the combined budget in the town of Merrimack between school and town is in the vicinity of $90 million, 70 and 20, and there's really
Yeah.
2 or 3 million either way, but call it 90 between friends. And when we had the deliberative session for the schools, there was 31 people that showed up. We had the deliberative session for and town meeting for the MVD, which is the village district, 22 people showed up. So, and then we have this passion to complain about our taxes, but where were we?
Well, that's happened forever, I think.
Right.
Because even in Massachusetts, where I was in, the voting delegate or whatever the heck they call them.
Yep.
Can't even remember that a while ago. But what's happening now? I mean, you said you were working closely with the finance committee there, and are there discussions? Because I know, for example, the governor's money for kindergarten is going to be a controversial thing. There are other things too in it. Are they understanding that? Are they?
Yeah, the Senate is going through. They had their public hearing,
Right.
as the speaker said, Monday night. By the way, that public hearing went until 5 minutes past 11 on Monday night,
Wow.
PM. So they toughed it out and sat there, and anyone and everyone that wanted to from the public was able to come
yeah.
and speak to
I
the
listened
Senate.
to it for a while.
Right.
On the scan.
So now they're navigating through, and they're using the governor's budget and what was our House budget, HB 1 and 2,
Right.
As foundations,
Right.
and then building from that as well. There was some great work that went into the House budget and the governor's budget, which the Senate recognizes, and they're building upon that. I don't foresee, wholesale significant changes. They'll always have their priorities, just like we have ours. And there'll be things that we'll want, and that's what Committee of Conference is all about, to kind of thrash those around and
So you
get
think
through
it'll
that
be
process.
fairly reasonable, not too drawn out or controversial?
Well, I think the committee of conference process probably won't be too bad. As I did 2 years ago, I'll put myself on the committee of conference. Last time the Senate president did as well. I suspect he probably will this time, which makes it easier having the two principals at the table instead of having to break, go ask, come back and forth. It's tougher on us, but I think it's better for the process. So I think we'll be able to get there much quicker. And certainly the president and myself will have conversations leading up there, up to there, and we'll have a good idea of where we want to go. But we're both conservative Republicans who basically have the same ideas, so it's not going to be terribly difficult to get there. I don't believe, assuming that a budget comes out of the Senate that is reasonable and that the governor can buy into. I mean, because this will be the odd thing, and people will have to remember. Unfortunately, it's odd, but we haven't been in a situation where our partner in this process is going to be a Republican governor.
Right.
And so he and his staff will be an intricate part of this too.
Yep.
Because whereas before, it wasn't as much a concern as what the Democratic governor wanted for us as Republicans. Now it will be a concern. We don't want to go back to the Craig Benson day when it was a Republican legislature with a Republican governor and the governor vetoed our budget. And that doesn't work out well for anybody.
No.
Well, I hope your projection is correct and we don't have a long June session.
I think we'll be fine.
We certainly hope so. The other thing that I touched on before is election law reform.
Right.
It's unfortunate that the Democratic Party hasn't partnered with us in this, and they have been shown to be wrong right down the line in this process a number of years ago, and it was probably 7 years ago or so at this point when we went to photo ID. They were saying there's going to be 10% of the people who don't have photo IDs. We said we believed it would be around 1%, and that we would have a mechanism for them to get photo ID. It was proven out to be less than 0.5% of
Really?
people.
That's right.
Oh,
And
I haven't heard that.
yeah, less than 0.5%. And we know that many of those people are frankly just being
it up.
stubborn.
Yeah.
They have IDs, and in many cases,
Don't wanna show it.
you know, the moderator will say, "Oh, for cripe's sake, Carl, I've known you for 20 years. You just go vote."
Yeah.
You know, people refusing to show IDs, but they're well known. So there have been no cases where people have been refused, and we have the mechanism in place for those few people. We're trying to tighten up on that because we do have what is called drive-by voting that was a result of a judge's decision. We're trying to tighten that up so you can't just drive through New Hampshire and say, well, I think I like New Hampshire and I think I'm going to stay here, and you go vote and then leave and say, gee, I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to go home.
Yeah.
You know, we have to stop that. It's not reasonable, but the Democrats continue to fight us on that issue and not work with us to really make something that is fair to the people who pay the bills in the state of New Hampshire. Right. You should not have people who do not have a stake in the game making the decisions who's going to represent us. And, you know, if you look at some of these rep races, you're down to, less than a handful of votes. Right. When you look statewide, you look at, some of the federal offices being down to 1,200 votes or so. And, you can look and say, all right, something's going on here. Now, one of the things that people want to try to do is say, we can't have students voting. Well, I don't think you should be voting from a dorm because that's not a domicile. But guess what? That's a decision that's made for us by the federal courts. I think Congress can deal with that. We can't. But but it should never be about students because there are many students who move into a college town and never leave, and they should have that right. You've got people that get married. One may come from Minnesota and the other Arkansas. They get married there. They're not going to go back to their parents' home. New Hampshire's their home during that period of time. So it can't be about students, but it should be about where do you live, what your intentions are. We need to tighten that up. We need to do a better job with that. But again, we're fighting with some people in our own party who are saying, well, you have to put a stop to student voting. Showing them the cases. We're having them talk with attorneys saying, we can't do what you want to do, but we're making some great progress, and don't stop all the progress just because we can't go as far as you'd like to go. Because I've been involved in this process with election law for about 10 years now, and it's baby steps. When I first started out on this, the Secretary of State would send a card to somebody's home where they said they lived, but there was no requirement to send it back. So, Dick could get a card and he'd just say, well, that person doesn't live here, throw it in the trash. Right. Now there's a requirement to have a positive. Right. I did that, and it took me two years to get that all the way through. So it's one piece at a time. Then we started working on photo ID, and as I told you the story there, it's just a little bit at a time. That's how we make progress. We rarely turn the state of ship around in one maneuver. Right.
Well, this new thing that'll be coming out, I guess, in a year or two, where you have to use the regular ID, photo ID.
Real ID.
Is that going to help a little bit?
No, that really won't. That's more a federal thing, and we have opt-out here. So,
but do you get to opt out in 2 years?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but you'd have to. That's for boarding planes and going to certain restricted area.
Right.
If you opt out, you're going to need a passport.
Right. But New Hampshire has now adopted. We passed the legislation for Real ID. So we are what's called Real ID compliant.
Okay.
Which means even though the license in your back pocket may not be the Real ID license,
federal,
when you'll make it through and be able to board a plane, but when your license expires at that time, you'll have the opportunity of doing the Real ID compliant license, or you can opt out.
Right.
Okay, and as the speaker said, if you opt out, then you'll need a passport. But because New Hampshire passed the legislation this year, we are now compliant, even though, again, the licenses in our back pockets may not be the new version. But once you renew, it is.
I don't think many people understand that.
Yeah, we have
No,
5
still
years to,
complicated.
Sure, most legislators don't.
Right.
I'm having a hard time.
yeah, we have
grasping
5
that, so
years
it's not-
to get fully
Okay.
compliant. Yeah.
All right. All right. So, what else do you see? Maybe I could switch a little bit here. You've worked with the governor directly, and has he said anything about looking at his different groups, different departments and stuff, and looking at how they are run? I mean, he's had
Yes.
enough problems, and he's bringing some good people in.
He's bringing some great people in.
Right.
You're going to see the Department of Education really transformative. Bringing in Frank Edelblu was just an unbelievably great move for him. He's bringing Charlie Allinghouse
Right.
into administrative services now. So as he's going through and looking at making his people are coming up for renewal, if you will, as department heads, but he's also looking into how the department's running. We know that he's looking at DES right now, and some other departments. So he's getting into it.
You're hitting at some of that things that I was hoping to hear.
Yeah.
The difficult one is going to be this monster that consumes almost half of the
Right.
state budget, which
Is
is
HHS.
health and human services. And the problem is that breaking that department up probably doesn't work, because one of the problems, as much as we try, sometimes one agency in government doesn't talk to the other. And all the components in HHS have to be talking to each other.
Right.
But what he is looking at and has started to do is appoint stronger division heads who have a little bit more autonomy, still going to be under one commissioner, but these division heads would be reporting directly to the governor and more responsive to the governor. So hopefully there's a way to do that makes sense, because that's really the elephant in the room.
That's right.
Yeah,
But the other two that he mentioned too are a big problem from what I could see in my couple years up
Right,
there.
and I think taking the department, what we refer to as dread, which nobody like, I'm from the Department of Dread, I'm here to help you. I mean,
Scare away all the
so
new
we're going to
companies.
be breaking cultural resource, the resources and economic development, so that we won't have dread. It'll be two smaller departments, which, because they really don't have anything to do with one another in theory. So that one makes sense. Should make things better.
Okay. With the Department of Education, I know he's gotten a little blowback on that.
Well,
and,
Frank wanted to, again, Frank is a very, very, he can see beyond the box.
He has a very good vision.
Very good vision, and he's a pleasure to work with. I mean, he's just, and it's understandable why he and the governor get along so well, because they both have this unbelievable high energy level and all this. And so, Frank sees
You have
some
to make
things.
sure you listen to both of them,
Yeah,
don't you?
and Frank sees some things, wants to create some change.
That's right.
And change is always difficult, and nobody wants to own up to the fact that change is necessary, because you like doing things the same way, thinking you're going to get a different result. Okay, that just doesn't happen. So it'll come.
Do you think we'll ever have to get back to, if you remember 2011 when we had this looking at rules and regulations, and that was one of the things that...
The governor is doing that. That's one of the things. He put the moratorium on new rules and regulations. I think there's a better way to do it than we are. When I first came into the legislature, we had essentially done a whole bunch of sunsetting. Everything had to be looked at. And I think that something similar to that probably needs to be done. That's why, part of what the governor's proposal is having more eyes on what's going on in business regulations. And I'm really hopeful that we have somebody who is really dedicated to looking at what are these regulations that are holding people back. I mean, we've got some stuff out there that's just plain silly that's developed over the years. And, we just keep doing the same stupid thing over and over again because nobody's got the time to look at it.
Right.
As legislators paid $100 a year, well, I get that 125.
You get to take
Can I
your
have a
wife
raise?
out to dinner once.
He said no quickly.
Just one last question. You bring
Thank
that up. When I was taking one of the subcommittees on there, I found the Department of Safety had regulations that defined the difference between a contractor and a full-time employee.
Mm-hmm.
3 different definitions that they worked with in there. How can anybody think that's appropriate?
Well, that's the problem.
Right.
Things develop in these separate units, and nobody looks at, well, have we already defined
Right.
that? And that's a problem, Carl, we had with floor amendment yesterday, because somebody had put in a bill, daycare agency,
Oh, yeah?
and we looked at that and said, well, where's that defined?
Right.
Well, that turned out to be not at all what anybody intended, but that was defined elsewhere in law. And so we had to bring a last-minute amendment in to actually
Is that what
make,
happens on that?
because people just think, okay, well, somebody
it's-
put it in, they must
yeah.
know what they're talking about, and you just move on.
Right.
But actually, it was Lynn Ober had asked a question which got me thinking about, well, what does that mean? And as I started looking into it, found out this isn't what people think it is.
Well, not only that, though, but the 3 different departments within the Department of Safety all had a reason why theirs was different,
Right.
and all 3 of them were different than the federal definition.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how
That's
can the
that's
workers...
the type of stuff we've got to stop.
Right.
Right.
You can't have, because how is the average business owner or, worker, anybody is supposed to know what they're supposed to pay
Right.
attention? Should be clearly defined
right.
once, that's it.
Right.
Should be uniform between the feds and the state and every state agency.
And it
things
hurts the
aren't.
little guys who can't fight back.
That's right.
Well,
Absolutely.
gentlemen, we could go on
Thank
and
you.
on, but I know you have other things to do, and thank you again. And hopefully we'll come back again in June and all be happy that everything's solved. And
Sounds
Let's go,
great.
Carl.
Okay, well, thanks again.
All right, take
Thank
care.
you.
Dick.
All right, you
talking
take
to you.
care. Yes.
Okay.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.